Well, John, I'm glad that you chimed in because we're going to, we're happy to skip ahead to you to speak right now as
Mm-hmm.
in place of Christy. Your topic is strategy to capture new and emerging searches. And John Lee, I'm so excited he is here today. And he's a learning strategist at Microsoft Advertising. And he pretty much knows he knows everything about Bing ads, Microsoft ads, and others as well. So thank you. Welcome, John.
Thank you. I don't know about everything. If I ever know everything officially, my life may be bored. I love learning. So let's jump right in. So as the title implies here, ignore the cheesy stock photo, but strategies to capture new and emerging searches. What does that mean exactly? Well, I'll get into it a little bit, but the world of search is constantly evolving. And how do you get yourself out of a pigeonhole, assuming that you are in one, and in a position to capture net new search interest? So that's really the crux of what I'm going to talk about today. So I love word clouds. I actually discovered a fun little app for PowerPoint to make a word cloud. Didn't know that existed, so that was fun. Again, always learning, right? Case in point. But some of these words, right? We're gonna see these throughout my presentation. I think I missed one big opportunity. I realized after I'd already done the word cloud that I used the phrase gold mine repeatedly and completely neglected to put that in my word cloud. But fluidity, flexibility, adaptive, scale, learn, auto magical, if you will. Those are what I need you to be thinking about, right? How can you be flexible and get yourself out of a fixed mindset with your campaigns and put yourself in a position to grow and learn? So the path we'll take to get there, one of my favorite questions is the keyword dead. The idea of tending to the whole forest, a section on taking action, and then we'll recap with some key takeaways. So putting on my learning specialist cap there. Is the keyword dead? So I included this here more as a tongue-in-cheek sort of thing because no, it's not. And my opinion is please stop asking that question. When the keyword officially dies, you will know. Google will tell you, we will tell you for Microsoft Advertising, right? When that day comes, you will know. You will not be left wanting for information. So for the time being, sure, targeting options that continue to expand, the variety is insane, but keywords still matter. However, I think you need, well, I don't think I know, you need to shift your mindset to search queries matter more. And that's really the currency of what's happening in search. Always has been, but even more so today than ever. So all the search queries, right? There's billions of them every day. 20% of those are new. Do that math of just a billion. That's a lot of queries that are new. So how do you capture that query data? What are you doing with that query data? And more importantly, how do you make yourself open to new query data when it comes? So we'll start this this thought process, in the idea of don't get lost in your own walled garden, and instead tend to the whole forest. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you look at this handy little chart that I made, a lot of us as digital advertisers, as PPC folk, spend a lot of our time on the targeting and the ad experience, as we should, right? There's a lot to do there. Some of us, particularly from a CRO or conversion rate optimization perspective, have spent some time on the landing page side. Some of us have even done SEO. It's been a little while. I've been there, done that. Probably have forgotten more than I ever learned. But again, we tend to skew towards the right side of this particular chart. But should we? So what I mean by the idea of the forest versus your garden, what I mean is you need to be looking at what's happening with on-page content. When we think about shopping feeds or other types of data feeds, of course, dynamic search ads, that's right there in the middle for a reason. We'll come back to that. Ad customizers, what's happening with responsive search ads. So this will give you a bit of an idea of the delicate dance we're going to have here over the next few minutes. So success for us as PPC focused digital advertisers is to consider that entire ecosystem. You cannot get away with hiding in the ad platforms and spending all of your time there. If you do, you're doomed to fail. Again, that's my perspective. Be consultative when it comes to content. Don't be shy to say, hey, client, or hey, boss, I see that we've got these wonderful isolated landing pages, but it's not enough, right? We need more. We need more content, and here's why. And hopefully my next few slides will give you the ammunition to do just that. And as I pointed out, conversion rate optimization, not a new topic. I know a lot of us have spent a lot of time, maybe even money in that space. That's not enough. Yes, it's important for sure, but we've also need to be consultative around theme, the actual words on the page. All of that comes together. So when we think about taking action, let's consider content first. So of course that lives here on the left side of this. So content strategy. So the way I look at it is content with a search query conscious, right? So you want to be thinking about how can I create new content, or work with my partners, my client, et cetera, to create new content. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking search queries, but that shouldn't necessarily be the only thing you're worried about. This is a great opportunity, right, for PPC SEO teams where they are separate to be working together in harmony. There's so much magic that can happen when that takes place, and they absolutely should. But think about just the depth, the variety of content. Think about, is my content, whether it's a blog or standalone pages, is there an industry or vertical frame of reference, right? Think about the long haul. If I create a piece of content that's referencing my industry, what does that mean? Well, potentially means, and we'll get to this, like with the DSA side or dynamic search ads, that I can start to match to queries that fall within my industry and vertical. Clearly defined product and service details. That's kind of a no-brainer, but certainly should be there, right? Don't blog for the sake of blogging. Make sure that a blog article ties back into what it is you're selling. And timeliness and accuracy matters. Using an editorial calendar, and there's a lot. This is probably one of the most loaded bullet points in my entire deck here. In that, what I'm getting at is think seasonality. Think topics of the day that people are worried about potentially searching about. So be timely in that case, but think ahead also when it comes to seasonality. And how can you get content out there that will help you match to queries that are tied to, say, Memorial Day, right? Or 4th of July, or whatever the, I've been seeing all kinds of memes, right? We're all, in quarantine, stuck at home. We've missed some holidays. We may miss a few more. I've been seeing a lot of memes around. We're going to have like the epic holiday at some point later this year, hopefully, that celebrates all of them at once. That'll be crazy. I'm sure we can all agree on that. But at the end of the day, regardless of what that content is, making sure that there's a clear call to action. So think of, okay, I'm not going to create what I would call a classic, PPC landing page where, it's super tight, lots of white space. I'm guiding somebody to my call to action. No, I'm thinking like actual content, meaty content that people can read and that a search bot can read and extrapolate some data, but it still should have a call to action. What should that person do? So this takes us to dynamic search ads, and dynamic search ads are awesome. If you didn't know this already, I know Neva called them out in her presentation earlier, but dynamic search ads are the reason my presentation exists today, because they live in this magical spot between all of this activity, content, targeting, ad experience. It is all of that and then some tied up in a neat bow. So that's why I'm going to talk about it. So it's that sweet spot to catch emerging searches, emerging queries. So it's the content, it's the targeting, it's the ad experience, it's a gold mine. There it is. That's the first instance. You're going to see that phrase pop up again, I promise. And what's really cool here is that by design, dynamic search ads adapt to changes in search trends, right? That's really what it's for. So as your potential audience, thinks of completely new ways of searching for your service, DSA likely is going to be there if you've put in the work, right, from a content perspective. So this is a great summary. I know this is being recorded. I'm not going to go through every point here, but suffice to say that the quick summary of dynamic search ads, it's a way to say, hey, Google, hey, Microsoft, here's my website, or here's a bundle of websites, or here's a page on my website. Look at that. And then here is the body of an ad. I would like you to match my page or pages and this ad to potential search queries, throw in a dynamic headline and serve that ad to that person to make a really relevant, tight experience. That's DSA in a nutshell. A little more complicated than that, but that explanation will have to suffice for today. And how do we get there? It's called an auto target. So again, it's not a keyword, right? We're not dealing in keywords here. We're dealing in auto targets. So URL contains product. We can also add them as exclusions, right? And so it uses a lot of the logic from our experience of keywords, but changes it considerably. And here's a really rough, simple scenario. So, potential auto targets, which, again, could be in separate ad groups, and I would recommend that they are. Having that catch-all, right? Okay, all pages, or at least the pages I want you to look at, excluding a few, just as that safety net, right? That catch-all, a broad category, a specific product or service type, and then maybe one page, right? So think about this nice, neat funnel. You could just as easily supplant a shopping example here, right? If you think about how product groups and that bundling strategy works, it's a lot of that same logic, and it goes deeper than that as well. You should also think about this from a bidding perspective too. Bid low on your catch-all, bid high on those super specific auto targets. Flex in between as needed, but that's a really good rule of thumb to get yourself started. So this magic sauce, and getting back to this idea of capturing emerging searches, you let that bad boy run, accumulate data, and then look at those search queries. What's popping for you? What's converting? What are you seeing in them? You're like, oh my God, I'd never even thought about that phrase being relevant to my business. And you know what? Not only are they searching that in volume, but they're converting on that as well. That is really magical stuff right there. But a lot of this too is finding those negatives, right? It's like, wow, okay, I see how I'm matched to that. I understand thematically, or even based on the words that are on my website, why I matched to that query. But you know what? That's trash. Let's add that as a negative. Rinse and repeat, right? And there's some really interesting connectivities here too. So going back to that whole PPC, SEO working together in harmony, because you're using your website content to match to a query, and also seeing what Google, what Microsoft are pulling in as that headline to serve in an ad, there's a lot of interesting data here to say, okay, have I optimized this content properly for SEO? Yes, no, maybe. So again, the work here can go many, many miles for you in your overall online marketing strategy. And then as fate would have it, yesterday, Ricardo here, Trafric, really cool Twitter handle, by the way. Trafric on Twitter basically made my point for me. So grabbing winning search terms with significant volume from a DSA campaign and putting them into their own ad group or in a new campaign after blocking them in my DSA campaign has got to be one of the most underrated Google ad strategies. And I would say further, Microsoft advertising as well. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So I'll blast through the second half of this. Really, DSA was kind of the big anchor point here. But I really would stress for you all to think through what's happening with your shopping feeds and keywords and audiences. And I'm not going to go too deep into either one of these. I think they would be worthwhile sessions of much greater length than 20 minutes of their own. But worth calling out shopping feeds, because honestly, that's like the OG, the original automagical content-based targeting device. I see it as a bit separate, right? Because you can completely and totally modify that feed separate from your website, right? Which gives you a much greater level of control versus a DSA. But again, it's a goldmine. Again, by design, adapts to changes in search terms. So worth calling out. And then keywords and audiences, again, goldmine. Worth calling out broad match and BMM, broad match modifier. Again, tremendous opportunity for experimentation and putting yourself out there in a meaningful way. But it's when you add that layer of audience that gives you some of that control, right? To say, okay, yes, I want to put this broad match term out into the world, but only if they've been to my site or only if they belong to this in-market audience. So food for thought, not going to go too deep there. Now, ad experience. There's a couple of really cool things I want to call out here. First is ad customizers and then responsive search ads. So ad customizers, in my mind, really bridge the gap between targeting and ad experience. And in the context of getting in front of emerging trends in search queries, thinking through, okay, I want to be both receptive and relevant to queries containing location names, right? So amazing tacos in Louisville, Kentucky, right? That's an amazing search, but I may not want to like have such crazy isolated, ad group strategy where I've got the keyword specifically for amazing tacos in Louisville, Kentucky, right? That's a lot of work, particularly if it's a brand new campaign. So how can I think through that, right? To get ahead of those queries and learn a bit more. What about, again, expanding reach with broad matching audiences? Or, hey, I want to flex because I've got frequent promotional changes and I don't want to constantly be uploading new ads. That's where ad customizers comes into play. So being able to swap out copy in your ad, to insert location name, to say, okay, if it's this keyword and this audience, serve this ad message. There's some really powerful things here that can allow you to bridge that gap between those two. So, okay, I want to be open and receptive and learn what's coming at me from a search query perspective, but at the same time, still delivering an amazing ad that's super relevant to that end user. Ton of control here available to you. The audience ID piece I think is magical. The last I checked, still Microsoft Advertising exclusive. Got to put that plug in there where I can. Responsive search ads. If you're not using RSAs yet, shame on you. I know that they came out hot and fast on the Google side, kind of got a bad reputation because people saw click-through rate spike, but they didn't necessarily see conversion data follow. That story I think is still evolving. We see things very differently on the Microsoft side, and I'll get to that in a second. So for those that aren't in the know yet, responsive search ads, you're going to put in up to 15 headlines, up to 4 descriptions, and then bibbity bobbity boop. Potential of up to 32,000 potential ad permutations out of that mix, meaning that the right message at the right time is going to get served for your set of keywords. It's really amazing stuff. And they're working in surprising ways. So again, this is Microsoft advertising data. When RSAs are running with expanded text ads in a given ad group, we are seeing a 16% increase in impression volume. I got a refresh of this data last week. I'm on the team that discusses this product feature every week. So this data is accurate and up to date. 16% increase in impression volume when they're in place. A 7% increase in conversion rate and an 8% decrease in cost per acquisition. If that didn't just blow your mind, I don't know what will. But the bottom line here is that RSAs are providing an ad group lift. Why is that? Well, RSAs, because all of that, those headlines, descriptions, etc., can dynamically shift. But to match the query, it means that your RSA can actually enter auctions that your expanded text ads couldn't because they weren't relevant enough to make that auction. Let that sink in. That's a big deal. So if you're not using RSAs yet, please do so. So quick tips. Make sure you're including as many assets as possible, at least 8 to 10 headlines, at least 2 to 3 descriptions. Should go without saying, but worth including. Make sure the content is distinct. Avoid repetition. Make sure you've got variations for brand, your calls to actions, benefits, keyword inclusion, right, in the copy. There's a lot of ways that you can go there. Make sure you include important disclaimers or legal statements. Only pin them if absolutely necessary. And I'll stress that, right? I think people really lob on to pinning because they feel like it gives them control. Recommendation is, if you have to, okay. If you don't have to, let it run a bit. See what sticks. You might be surprised and your assumptions may get myth busted. And then of course, write headlines and descriptions as complete thoughts because they're gonna get willy-nilly swapped in and out in different orders. And so make sure that they are complete thoughts. Our good buddy Brad just posted this article last week. Again, a really strong deep dive on the Google side data. But the second half of the article is all about ad writing. It's specific to responsive search ads. It's really amazing stuff. So highly recommend that article. And I promise, just because he gave me a lot of this information several weeks ago in a one-on-one chat, that, like, again, those tips work just as well for Microsoft advertising. It's really, really solid stuff. Phew, I'm out of breath now. Key takeaways. Keywords aren't dead. search queries are more important. Focus on the entire ecosystem, right? So think of the forest, not just your garden, your little piece of that. It's the content, it's targeting, and it's the ads. The DSA, dynamic search ads, really magical thing. It's a sweet spot that allows you to leverage that entire ecosystem to great effect. And really a lasting thought here is be receptive to new queries and still serve relevant ads by leveraging ad customizers and RSAs. So with that, I will take a breather and maybe even a sip of coffee and look to Lisa to see if we've got any questions.
We do have some questions and I love them. I love taking questions that I am very curious about. Okay.
Now you got me worried. Uh-oh.
I know. Mike Crimmins wants to know, when is the right time to add DSA with a newish account?
So my answer may sound like wishy-washy publisher side nonsense, but it's not. So this comes from a guy that's been in this industry for a very long time. I would say that there's no wrong time to start DSA. And if you have a brand new account, brand new campaigns, you're going in with working assumptions. I've done my keyword research. This is my proposed campaign structure for core search. Great. Also set up a DSA campaign based on some working assumptions. Run them both in tandem and then learn, right? You're going to learn from both, and there's going to be information flow both ways. When you think about negatives, of course, that's probably the biggest one. But I would say there's no wrong time. And if I were to build out a campaign today, I would likely install both from the get-go.
Okay, this is a long question from Matt Caldwell. With so many options for RSA, does limiting headlines with lower impression campaigns make sense? Hold on a second. The thought being that to find the right ad and without the impressions to cycle through all the options, it could take forever.
It potentially could. And so what I would say here is if you have an ad group, they're like, I think there would be benefit to RSA, but it's low impressions. I would say to put yourself, put the right foot forward, or the best foot forward, I guess, it's the better phrase there, is don't test multiple RSAs. Like start with one. And try to put as many of your great best ideas into those headlines and descriptions and just roll with that one against your expanded text ads and see what shakes out. I think that it is a valid concern. What I'll say though is that I don't have any visible into what's happening on the Google side. I do have visibility into what's happening within Microsoft Advertising. That algorithm is getting updated pretty much weekly. It is some of the best tech that we have running today. That's my opinion. I don't. Others may have different answers, but it's really doing some amazing stuff. And so I would say what may happen is that a handful of those headlines, a handful of those descriptions will likely gain traction pretty quickly, and you might see those pick up and be in rotation consistently, and others just fall off. Right. So it's a long-winded way of saying don't stress about it. Limit yourself to one ad in a low impression scenario, and the rest likely is going to shake out in the wash.
I think that's great. I'm going to study your tips for sure.